Hello, my name is Heidy Castillo, and today I'm going to be sharing a presentation about questioning strategies. So today I will be focusing on the 4 depths of knowledge. The first depth of knowledge is recall. And at this level, students remember information from memory. Some examples of questions in this level are who, what, when, and where. Students can be asked to define something or recall information. The next depth of knowledge is skills and concepts. So at this level, students need to demonstrate that they can interpret information and summarize key parts of text and support their claims. Some examples of questions are why and how. The third depth of knowledge is strategic thinking. And at this level, students then use their acquired knowledge and apply it in different areas. Can you formulate blank? What is your interpretation of blank? How would you solve blank? Those are some examples of strategic thinking. Extended thinking. So this is the 4th level, and this level requires students to go above simply explaining something. They need to evaluate if an argument has validity and formulate their own ideas. They also need to be able to use what they know from different sources to create their own ideas. This requires time and often multiple sources. So these are some examples of questions. As you can see, it requires a student to think a little deeper about things and include their own ideas about the concept. How would you plan blank? What evidence can you give for this? How can you prove or disprove something? So next, I want to talk a little bit about questions that can be asked to students at each level during pre-assessment, formative assessments, and summative assessments. To do this, I'm going to focus on an activity called the Lunar New Year, and it's targeted for 2nd grade students. The objective is, after watching a video and listening to a book explaining Chinese New Year, students will create a Chinese New Year dragon using a paper plate, paint, and paper. The dragon they will make is from the traditional Chinese dragon dance. So we start with the pre-assessment. And so for the pre-assessment, we want to target that prior knowledge the students come in with. I want to tap into that prior knowledge, and we start with recall. So what is New Year? What do students know about that? Get them thinking about that. The next one, skills and concepts. How do you celebrate, or do you celebrate New Year? Then strategic thinking, a little deeper. Why do people celebrate the beginning of a new year? So we're just tapping into the prior knowledge without actually talking about Chinese New Year quite yet. Then we move on to formative assessment. And this would be something that you do during the lesson. So while they're interacting with the video and the book, we ask some of these questions. Recall. We want them to recall some of the facts that they've just learned or heard. Where is Chinese New Year celebrated? And I know that might seem a little bit straightforward, Chinese New Year. However, it's not only celebrated in China. So it's a question that will get them thinking a little bit more about the facts that they just heard. Skills and concepts. How is the dragon related to Chinese New Year? Strategic thinking. Why do you think Chinese New Year is celebrated over 2 weeks? And why is it important for Ruby? So at this point, we've read the book from the text to visit her grandma. So during strategic thinking here, we might get multiple different kinds of answers. So for recall and skill and concepts, we typically get the same answer because there is a recall, so we just get the one. It's right or it's wrong. Strategic thinking might have a little bit more wiggle room. Why is it important? We might have children who say one answer and children who say something else, and that's okay. The next one is summative assessment. So this one will focus on after the lesson, once the lesson is done. And this will give us a lot of information. So to recall, who do families pay a visit on the first day of the Chinese New Year? Going back to those details, those facts, skills and concepts, how is luck and prosperity represented for Chinese New Year? Strategic thinking, how is the way America celebrates New Year similar or different to Chinese New Year? So here we have the students analyzing and comparing two different cultures. And how is it different, or the same? How are they the same? Extended thinking. So here we want to go a little bit more above and beyond just giving a simple explanation or regurgitating information. We want students to evaluate and form their own ideas. So for this, the question would be, after watching the video and reading the book about Chinese New Year, explain why Chinese New Year is important to the people who celebrate it. Then I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the strategies that you can implement during the lesson. So one strategy for implementing a formative assessment during the Lunar New Year activity would be to use a class discussion. So the teacher asks the question to the class and takes multiple answers while writing the answers on the board or an anchor chart. This can be done through the lesson as the questions become appropriate, or at the end to recap the entire activity. So another strategy for implementing a formative assessment is for teachers to ask questions and in the form of an exit ticket. So you ask a question, you pass out little strips of paper, and students write down their answer. Why is Chinese New Year celebrated over 2 weeks? And then you can get those little strips of paper back and look over them. One strategy for implementing depth of knowledge questions during a summative assessment would be to have students write about 3 sentences, depending on the time and your students, to the following question, which is the extended thinking question from earlier. After watching the video and reading the book about Chinese New Year, explain why Chinese New Year is important to the people who celebrate it. The question is at the 4th level of the depth of knowledge, which is extended thinking. And by answering this question, students are going above and beyond giving definitions and are now evaluating and creating an argument, forming their own ideas. They are using more than one source to answer the question as well, because they have the video and the book. So now I wanted to give a little bit of some digital tools that you can use. I use these almost every day. They're great, especially Nearpod. So Nearpod provides teachers with an online platform to engage students in an either in-person or virtual setting. Teachers get to create interactive lessons that include text, images, games, open-ended questions, and quizzes. As the lesson moves along, teachers can embed questions that students can answer either anonymously or with their name attached. That depends on the teacher's, what the teacher wants. For example, I like to keep my students anonymous to each other, and I know who wrote what, and I let my students share with their voice if they'd like, but as long as they share in the Nearpod, then it's okay. The next resource is called Boom Learning. So Boom Learning takes a similar approach, however, it is more geared towards younger students. There is no lesson attached to the questions. However, the questions appear in a deck and have text to speech. So that's a great tool for younger students who might not read fully quite yet. And it also tracks students' work, so the teacher can go back and look at it when needed. So that is my presentation for today. I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for your time.